25 years is a long time to serve your country. It's a lifetime of missed birthdays, absent Christmases, and relationships maintained through crackling satellite calls. You don't choose this life because it's easy. You choose it because something inside you knows the value of standing for something greater than yourself. I enlisted at 19, a kid from Springfield, Missouri, with more determination than direction. The military gave me both. I rose through the ranks steadily, not because I was exceptional, but because I was reliable. In a world of chaos, reliability becomes its own kind of superpower. I met Margaret during my first stateside assignment. She worked at the base library, quiet, thoughtful, with eyes that seemed to read more than just the books she cataloged. We, married 6 months later, and for a while, the military life seemed to suit us both. We understood the rhythm of departures and homecomings, the language of sacrifice that civilians often struggle to translate. When Samantha was born, the world tilted on its axis. I held that tiny bundle in my arms and felt a responsibility heavier than any rucksack I'd ever carried. Suddenly, every decision, every deployment, every choice was measured against a new metric. What would it mean for her? But life rarely follows the plans we make. Margaret was diagnosed with aggressive lymphoma when Samantha was just 7. 8 months later, I was a widower trying to explain to a second grader why mommy wasn't coming home. The military offered compassionate reassignment, keeping me stateside for 3 years while we both learned to navigate this new, diminished world. "Why do you have to go away again, Daddy?" Samantha asked the night before my first post-bereavement deployment. Her small fingers traced the captain's bars on my uniform, her eyes holding a wisdom no child should possess. "Because I made a promise," I told her, searching for words simple enough for a child, but true enough for the weight of the moment. "To protect people. To help make sure other little girls can grow up safe with their daddies and mommies." "But what about me?" Her voice trembled slightly. "Who protects me when you're gone?" I had no perfect answer, just the reality of a single father balancing duty to country and child. "Aunt Claire will be here, and I'll call whenever I can, and I'll always, always come back to you." Those early years were a patchwork of deployments, video calls, and intense periods of reconnection. I learned to braid hair through YouTube tutorials watched on military base computers. I mailed handwritten letters that arrived weeks after I wrote them. I relied on my sister Claire to fill the gaps, to be the steady presence Samantha needed when I couldn't be there. When I was home, I worked security jobs on weekends, saving every extra dollar for Samantha's college fund. Sleep became a luxury, rest an afterthought. But every time I looked at my daughter, growing smarter, stronger, more beautiful each year, I knew it was worth it. By the time Samantha started high school, I had been promoted to captain and secured a more stable position at Fort Carson. We moved into base, housing, a modest 2-bedroom apartment that finally felt like home. For the first time, I could attend parent-teacher conferences, help with homework, be the father I'd always wanted to be. "You know," 16-year-old Samantha said one evening as we washed dishes side by side, "my friends think it's cool that you're in the Army." I chuckled. "Do they now?" "Yeah. Emma's dad sells insurance. Tyler's dad is an accountant. But my dad?" She flicked soap suds at me playfully. "My dad protects the nation." I didn't correct her overstatement. The truth was far less glamorous. Logistics management, personnel coordination, occasional peacekeeping missions. But I understood what she meant. In her eyes, the uniform stood for something. And that meant everything to me. Then came Brandon Cooper, her junior year of college. Handsome, confident, studying business administration with dreams of corporate success. The first time she brought him home, I saw the way she looked at him, like he hung the moon and stars. I also saw something else, something that made the hairs on my neck stand up, a calculation behind his smile, a measuring in his gaze as he took in our modest apartment. My uniform, hanging in the open closet. "Sir, it's an honor to meet you," he said, shaking my hand with just the right amount of pressure. "Sam talks about you all the time." "All good things, I hope," I replied, watching his eyes. "Of course. She says you're the most honorable man she knows." Something in the way he emphasized honorable struck me wrong, as if honor were a quaint concept, something to be admired from a distance rather than lived. But I said nothing. Samantha was happy, radiating a joy I hadn't seen since before Margaret's illness. Who was I to cast shadows? 2 years later, they were engaged. 1 year after that, married. And through it all, I kept any reservations to myself, focusing instead on securing their future. I helped with the down payment on their first home, a modest starter house 30 minutes from base. When Brandon mentioned struggling to find work with his business degree, I pulled strings to get him interviewed for a civilian contractor position with base support services. "You didn't have to do that, Dad," Samantha said when she found out. "I know," I told her. "I wanted to. That's what family does." What I didn't say was that I hoped my gesture might foster respect, might help Brandon see the military not just as a career, but as a community, a way of life built on values that mattered. I wanted him to understand why his wife was proud of her father, why she believed in service and sacrifice. I was wrong. The seeds of disrespect had already taken root, and no amount of generosity would change that. But I wouldn't understand how wrong until much later, until I returned from my final deployment to find my home invaded, my honor questioned, and my patience at its end. Sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on foreign soil. Sometimes they happen right at home, in the spaces we thought were safe. And sometimes the enemy isn't who we expect. The call came on a Tuesday in April, sunny, mild, deceptively ordinary. I was 3 months from retirement, already mentally arranging the fishing trips and woodworking projects that would fill my civilian days. Samantha and Brandon had been married for 4 years by then, settling into what appeared from the outside to be domestic contentment. "Captain Sawyer?" Colonel Reynolds's voice crackled through the phone. "We need you for one last operation. Classified. Middle East. 14 months. Possibly longer." My stomach dropped. "Sir, with respect, I'm set to retire in 90 days. We're aware of your retirement timeline, Captain. This comes from higher up. Your experience with the regional logistics network is invaluable for this particular mission. Your retirement will be deferred with full compensation adjustments." I thought about refusing. For the first time in my career, I considered putting myself first. But 25 years of service creates a reflex that's hard to override. Duty calls, you answer. "When do I deploy, sir?" 72 hours. Briefing tomorrow at 800. I hung up and stared at the walls of my apartment, the home I'd created, the sanctuary I'd returned to when this final mission was complete. Photographs of Samantha at various ages lined the bookshelf. Margaret's favorite painting, a watercolor of Colorado mountains, hung above the small dining table. It wasn't much, but it was mine, earned through years of service. I called Samantha that evening to break the news. 14 months? Her voice caught. "But Dad, what about your retirement? What about the plans we made for that fishing trip to Minnesota?" "It'll keep," I assured her, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "This is important, honey. One last mission." "You always say that," she sighed, but there was understanding beneath her disappointment. She'd grown up a military child. She knew the drill. "I'll make sure everything's taken care of here," I told her. "The apartment will be closed up, bills on auto pay. I'll call when I can." The conversation shifted to logistics. Who would water my single houseplant? The base chaplain. Where I kept my will. The filing cabinet, third drawer. How often I'd be able to communicate. Irregularly, given the nature of the deployment. What I didn't anticipate, what never crossed my mind, was that I should secure my apartment against family intrusion. In 25 years of service, through multiple deployments, that had never been necessary. Military housing was respected. My personal space had always remained untouched, waiting for my return. I was unprepared for what Brandon would do in my absence. The deployment itself was grueling, hot, dangerous, complex work coordinating supply chains through hostile territory. I lived in dust and uncertainty, snatching sleep when possible, celebrating small victories, like a successfully delivered medical shipment or a convoy that returned without incident. Communication home was sporadic. Video calls with Samantha were precious rarities, each one revealing subtle changes in her appearance, her apartment, her life that continued flowing forward, while mine stood suspended in the amber of military obligation. "Brandon got promoted," she told me during one call, her image pixelated but her pride clear. "He's handling vendor contracts now. More money, more responsibility." "That's great," I said sincerely. Despite my reservations about Brandon's character, I wanted him to succeed, for Samantha's sake, if nothing else. "He says it's partly thanks to you," she continued. "The recommendation you made got him in the door. He's been learning a lot about how the base operates." I nodded, pleased that my efforts had borne fruit. "I'm glad to hear it. The military community takes care of its own." Little did I know how Brandon was interpreting those words, not as a statement of collective responsibility, but as an entitlement, not as a privilege to be respected, but as a resource to be exploited. 6 months into the deployment, Samantha mentioned in passing that she'd be visiting her mother-in-law in Seattle for 3 weeks. "It'll be good to get away," she said. "Brandon's working so much and I miss having family around." "Sounds perfect," I told her. "Take lots of pictures. The Pacific Northwest is beautiful this time of year." It was the last substantial conversation we had before my return. The final months of the deployment intensified. Communication channels became less reliable, and I focused entirely on completing the mission and coming home safely. As the transport plane touched down at Peterson Air Force Base, I felt the weight of the past 14 months begin to lift. The familiar Colorado landscape, mountains sharp against the sky, air thin and clean, welcomed me back. I processed through debriefing, collected my belongings, and caught the shuttle to Fort Carson with a single thought pulsing through my mind: home. I wanted nothing more than a hot shower, clean sheets, and the blessed silence of my own space. No mortar fire in the distance, no radios crackling with coded messages, no responsibility for anything beyond my own recovery for at least 72 hours. The walk to my building was both foreign and achingly familiar, muscle memory guiding me while my eyes reacquainted themselves with details that had faded during my absence. The cracked concrete step at the entrance, the faded mural of Pike's Peak in the lobby, the slight squeak of the third-floor landing. Then, my door. I inserted the key, turned the lock, and stepped into a nightmare I never saw coming. The laughter hit me first. Young, male, careless. Then the smell, beer, pizza, unwashed bodies. My eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through blinds that should have been open, revealing the scene that would set everything in motion. Brandon lounged on my couch, controller in hand, eyes glazed from alcohol or worse. 2 friends flanked him, equally disheveled. Pizza boxes created a greasy archipelago across my coffee table. Beer bottles stood like sentinels throughout the room, and in the corner, barely visible, was a garbage bag stuffed with what looked like my uniforms. The violation was total. The disrespect, absolute. "Hey, look who's back from pretending to matter!" Brandon's words slurred slightly at the edges. I said nothing, processing the scene, calculating options. 25 years of military. Discipline held my anger in check, even as it burned hot beneath my skin. One of Brandon's friends elbowed him, suddenly aware of the tension. "Dude, isn't that my father-in-law?" "Yeah." Brandon grinned, all teeth and challenge. "This old captain doesn't run things anymore. Welcome home, sir." The salute he offered was a mockery, sloppy, exaggerated, designed to wound. I set my bags down slowly, deliberately. "Where's Samantha?" My voice emerged steadier than I expected. Brandon shrugged. "Visiting mom. Extended stay. You know how women are. Say 3 weeks, mean 3 months." One of his friends shifted uncomfortably. "Brandon, maybe we should—" "Relax," Brandon cut him off. "Sam said I could stay here while he was gone. I mean, the army pays for it, right? We might as well make use of it." The lie was transparent. Samantha would never authorize this invasion. She knew what this apartment meant to me. Before I could respond, the building's security door buzzed below. Heavy footsteps ascended, purposeful and measured. A knock at my door, 3 sharp raps that commanded attention. I opened it to find General Jonathan Briggs standing in the hallway, spine straight, gaze level. The sight of him, the highest-ranking officer on base, standing at my door was so unexpected that for a moment, I wondered if I was hallucinating from deployment fatigue. "Captain Sawyer," he said, voice pitched to carry past me into the apartment. "I came to welcome you home personally." His eyes took in the scene behind me, narrowing slightly. "I see I've arrived at an interesting moment." Brandon scrambled to his feet, recognition and alarm finally registering on his face. His friends followed suit, suddenly finding urgent reasons to leave. "General, sir," I began, but he raised a hand. "I believe I understand the situation, Captain." He stepped inside, authority radiating from him like heat. From his breast pocket, he withdrew an envelope. "The base command has issued an emergency reassignment order. This property has just been reclassified, under your name exclusively, and I believe there are some civilians who need to vacate immediately." Brandon's face drained of color. "Sir, I can explain," he started. "Mr. Cooper," the general cut him off. Explanation time is over. Evacuation time has begun. You have 30 minutes to remove yourself and your belongings from this property before security arrives to assist you. It was the beginning of the end for Brandon. But for me, standing in my violated home with exhaustion weighing on every limb, it was something else entirely. It was the first step toward reclaiming my honor. After Brandon and his friends hastily departed, General Briggs stayed behind. We stood in the wreckage of my apartment, taking inventory of the disrespect that surrounded us. Empty beer bottles lined the windowsills. Fast food containers festered on countertops. The air smelled of stale beer and neglect. "I apologize you had to see this, sir," I said, military formality taking over as I struggled to process what had happened. General Briggs waved away my apology. "At ease, Captain. You're not responsible for this." He picked up a discarded sock with the tip of his pen and dropped it into a nearby waste bin. "How long were you deployed? 14 months? "Yes, sir. Returned today." The general nodded, moving to the kitchen where he filled a glass with water and handed it to me. I hadn't realized how parched I was until the cool liquid hit my throat. "I received a call from Housing Authority yesterday," he explained, leaning against the counter. "Complaints about noise, unauthorized occupants, possible contraband. When I saw your name on the apartment registry and knew your deployment schedule, things didn't add up. I sank into the only clean chair, suddenly overwhelmed by the betrayal layered upon my exhaustion. I had no idea, sir. My son-in-law, he told me my daughter knew he was staying here. And you believe that?" I looked up sharply. "No, sir. Samantha would never." "I didn't think so." The general's eyes softened slightly. "Captain, I've known you for 15 years, served with you in 3 theaters. Your integrity has never been in question." He walked to the window, staring out at the base that sprawled below. "What most civilians don't understand is that military housing isn't just a perk. It's part of the covenant between soldiers and the service. Your home should be waiting for you exactly as you left it." I nodded, throat tight with gratitude for his understanding. "The paperwork I brought," he continued, "isn't just for show. I've issued a formal complaint. Cooper's contractor credentials have been flagged for review, and he's been barred from entering any residential area on base without escort." "That seems extensive, sir." "Does it?" The general turned to face me fully. "Cooper didn't just crash on your couch, Captain. According to building security, he's been hosting parties here for months, using your address to access restricted areas. There are reports of him bragging about connections to secure contracts." My stomach tightened. This wasn't just disrespect. This was exploitation. "I'll handle this, sir," I said, standing straighter despite my fatigue. "I know you will, Rick." The general rarely used first names. The shift signaled we were speaking not just as officers, but as men who understood honor. "Take 48 hours. Rest. Then come see me. We have things to discuss about your future." After he left, I stood alone in the quiet disaster of my apartment. I should have started cleaning. Should have called Samantha. Instead, I walked to the bedroom, my bedroom, and pulled open the closet door. The garbage bag Brandon had stuffed with my uniforms lay in a heap. I knelt beside it, carefully extracting each piece. My dress blues, wrinkled beyond recognition. My service uniform, stained with what smelled like pizza sauce. And at the bottom, the shadow box containing my medals. The Bronze Star, the Purple Heart, the Meritorious Service Medals. Its glass cracked diagonally across the center. Something broke inside me. Not in anger, but in clarity. For 25 years, I had given everything to serve. Had missed my daughter's childhood. Had buried my wife alone while on compassionate leave. Had sacrificed normal life for something I believed was greater. And this disrespect, this mockery, was how a civilian like Brandon Cooper saw it. As something to use, something to exploit, something without value beyond what could be extracted from it. I carefully laid each uniform on the bed, smoothing wrinkles with hands that had once directed supply chains across combat zones. Tomorrow I would clean them, press them, restore them, just as I would restore my honor. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with the quiet dignity of a soldier who knows exactly who he is. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my door. Still groggy from my first night back on American soil, I stumbled to answer it. "Is it true?" Samantha stood in the hallway, eyes red-rimmed, voice thick with emotion. Did he really stay? Here? In your apartment?" I stepped back, letting her inside. The apartment was still in disarray. I'd managed only to collect the garbage and start a load of laundry before exhaustion claimed me. "Samantha," I began, but she cut me off. "Don't lie to protect me, Dad. Please, I need to know." I sighed. "Yes, he was here when I returned. With friends." Her face crumpled. "I had no idea, I swear. He told me he was staying with his college roommate while I was in Seattle." She looked around, taking in the state of the place. "This is disgusting. I can't believe he would do this." "Sit down," I said gently, clearing space on the couch. "How did you find out?" She pulled out her phone, showing me a text message from an unknown number. "Your husband has been barred from Fort Carson housing. Thought you should know. A friend." "At first I thought it was a prank," she said. "But then I called Brandon and he wouldn't answer. So I called his work, and they said he'd been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation." Her eyes, so like her mother's, searched mine. "What investigation, Dad?" I explained everything. My return, the scene I'd discovered, General Briggs's intervention. I softened nothing but added no accusations. The facts were damning enough without my commentary. Samantha listened, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. "I don't understand," she finally whispered. "Why would he do this? He knows what your service means. He knows what this apartment means to you." I chose my words carefully. "Honey, I think Brandon has complicated feelings about the military, about what it represents." "What do you mean? Has he ever said anything to you about my service? About the time I spend deployed?" She hesitated, and in that pause, I heard the truth she didn't want to voice. He says sometimes that you chose the Army over us, over Mom, when she was sick, over me, growing up." Her voice was small, ashamed. "I always defended you. Always. But maybe part of me wondered too." The word struck deeper than any physical wound I'd ever received. I took her hand, this daughter who had grown up in the shadow of my absences. "Samantha, listen to me. Every deployment, every assignment, every time I left, it broke my heart. But I believed I was building something for you. Security. A future. A world where you could be safe." I squeezed her fingers gently. Was I perfect? No. Did I miss things I wish I hadn't? Absolutely. But I never ever chose the Army over you. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know that, Dad. I do. But Brandon, he doesn't see it that way. He says the military brainwashes people, makes them think sacrifice is noble when really it's just unnecessary." "And what do you think?" She looked up, suddenly fierce through her tears. "I think my father is the most honorable man I know, and I think my husband has betrayed both of us." We sat together on that couch for hours, piecing together the extent of Brandon's deception. He had told Samantha I gave permission for him to check on the apartment occasionally, had told me she knew. He was using it, had played us against each other while helping himself to the benefits of my service. "What happens now?" she finally asked, as afternoon shadows lengthened across the room. "That depends on you," I said carefully. "He's your husband." She stood, gathering her purse with determined movements. "Not for much longer, I think." "Samantha." "No, Dad." Her voice was stronger now. Resolved. "This isn't just about the apartment. It's about respect. It's about honesty. It's about recognizing the value of sacrifice." She squared her shoulders in a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. It was exactly how Margaret had stood when making difficult decisions. "I need to talk to him, alone." I nodded, knowing better than to argue. My daughter had inherited more than just her mother's eyes. She had her spine of steel as well. After she left, I continued the process of reclaiming my space. I washed sheets, scrubbed floors, aired out rooms. With each surface restored, I felt myself returning too, not just from deployment, but from the shock of betrayal. As evening fell, I realized I hadn't eaten since the protein bar on the transport plane. I was contemplating the empty refrigerator when my phone rang. General Briggs. "Captain, I hope I'm not disturbing your recovery." "Not at all, sir." "Good. I wanted to update you. The investigation into Cooper's activities has expanded. It seems he's been using your name and connection to facilitate vendor introductions, possibly taking payments for consulting." My hand tightened on the phone. "That's concerning, sir." "Indeed. Military police will want to speak with you tomorrow. Nothing to worry about. You're not implicated, but your testimony will help establish the timeline." After we hung up, I sat in my newly cleaned apartment, staring at the wall. The betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. Brandon hadn't just disrespected my home. He'd weaponized my name, my reputation, my quarter-century of service. The anger I'd suppressed since returning threatened to surface. I could destroy him with what I knew, could ensure he never worked in military contracting again, could make him regret every disrespectful word, every exploitation of my absence. But as I looked at the shadow box of medals I'd carefully restored and rehung, I remembered something my first commander had told me. True strength isn't about what you can destroy. It's about what you choose to protect. I would protect my honor, my daughter's future, the integrity of the service I believed in. Brandon Cooper had made his choices. Now I would make mine, and mine would be worthy of the uniform I wore. 3 days after my return, I received a text from Samantha. He's coming to get his things from our house. I won't be there. Could you? I understood what she was asking. Not just for me to supervise Brandon's removal of possessions, but to be the solid presence she needed right now. To stand guard not over things, but over the emotional boundaries she was establishing. Of course, I texted back. What time? Noon. Thank you, Dad. The house, the one I'd helped them buy, sat in a modest subdivision 15 miles from base. I arrived 30 minutes early using Samantha's key to let myself in. The home showed signs of hasty departure. A coffee mug half full on the counter, mail scattered across the dining table, a sweater draped over a chair back. I made myself inconspicuous, taking a seat in the living room with a clear view of the front door. At precisely noon, a car pulled into the driveway. Not Brandon's usual vehicle, but a friend's pickup truck. He emerged alone, shoulders hunched defensively as he approached the door. The key scraped in the lock. He stepped inside, freezing when he saw me sitting there. "Captain Sawyer," he said, voice carefully neutral. "I didn't expect to see you here." Samantha asked me to come. I kept my tone equally measured. She thought it would make things easier. Brandon's face tightened. Easier for who? For everyone. I stood, maintaining the distance between us. "She made a list of what belongs to you. It's on the counter." He glanced toward the kitchen, then back at me, a familiar defiance creeping into his expression. "This is between me and my wife. You don't need to be involved. I became involved the moment you decided to use my apartment as your personal party venue. That's what this is about?" He laughed bitterly. "You got your precious apartment back. Your ranks and medals are safe. Why are you still pushing this?" I studied him, this man who had charmed my daughter, accepted my help, and then systematically undermined everything I stood for. In another life, I might have grabbed him by the collar, might have made physically clear the consequences of his disrespect. Instead, I asked a simple question. "Why, Brandon?" He blinked, thrown by the directness. "Why what? Why the contempt? I helped you get your job, contributed to your house, welcomed you into my family. What did I do to earn such disrespect?" For a moment, something genuine flashed across his face. Not remorse exactly, but recognition. Then the mask returned. "You want to know why?" He stepped closer, voice dropping. "Because you're everything that's wrong with this country. Blind obedience, unquestioning sacrifice, throwing away your life and your family's lives. For what? So defense contractors can get rich? So politicians can play world police? Is that what you think service means? I think it's a scam," he spat, "and the fact that you can't see it makes you either a fool or a coward. You weren't there when Samantha needed you. You weren't there when she graduated, when she got her heart broken, when she needed a father, not a uniform." Each accusation landed like a physical blow, not because they were true, but because they revealed how thoroughly he had misunderstood, or chosen to misunderstand, both me and my daughter. "Brandon," I said, quietly, "I missed things I'll always regret, but I never abandoned my responsibility to Samantha. I built a life that honored her mother's memory, that showed her what commitment means." "Commitment?" He laughed. "You were committed to the military, not your family." "They weren't separate things to me," I replied. "Everything I did was for both." He shook his head, dismissing my words entirely. "Whatever helps you sleep at night, Captain. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got things to pack." I stepped aside, letting him move toward the bedroom. But as he passed, I spoke again. "One more thing, Brandon." He turned, exasperated. "What now?" "General Briggs mentioned an investigation about you using my name for vendor contracts." His face drained of color. That was just networking. Nothing illegal. The military police disagree. They'll be contacting you. Panic flickered across his features. You reported me? After everything Samantha and I have done for you? The audacity of his statement was almost impressive. I didn't report anything. Your own actions created a trail that leads directly to you. You could stop this, he said, desperation creeping in. Tell them it was a misunderstanding, that you authorized me to use your name. I looked at him for a long moment. No, Brandon, I couldn't, because that would be a lie, and lies are not how I've built my life. He stared at me, calculation and fear warring in his eyes. Then something shifted, a realization that this situation was beyond manipulation. You've ruined my career, he said flatly. I hope you're satisfied. No, I corrected him. I'm not satisfied. I'm disappointed. In you. In my judgment for not seeing who you really were. In the pain this is causing my daughter. I moved toward the door. You have 1 hour to collect your personal items. Anything else will need to be arranged through Samantha's lawyer. I stepped outside into the bright Colorado day, breathing deeply. The confrontation had left me drained but oddly centered. For the first time since returning, I felt firmly anchored in my own truth. My phone buzzed with a text from General Briggs. My office, 1400 hours. Important matter to discuss. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same steadiness that had carried me through 25 years of service. Not because I was a perfect soldier or a perfect father, but because I understood something Brandon Cooper never would. True honor isn't bestowed by others. It's built by your own hands, one choice at a time. As I drove back to base, leaving Brandon to dismantle the life he'd sabotaged, I thought about Samantha, about the difficult path ahead for her, about how I could support her without overstepping. The answer came to me with surprising clarity. By continuing to be exactly who I had always been. Not perfect, not infallible, but present, reliable, true to my word and my values. It was all I had ever tried to be, and right now, it was exactly what she needed. General Briggs's office reflected the man himself, austere, precisely organized, devoid of unnecessary decoration. A single photograph of his family stood on the desk. The American flag occupied one corner, the Army flag the other. Between them hung his impressive collection of medals and commendations, earned through decades of distinguished service. I stood at attention until he waved me into a chair. At ease, Captain. You look better rested than when I saw you last. Yes, sir. Thank you for your intervention. He nodded, pulling a folder from his desk drawer. I've been reviewing your service record, Rick. 25 years. Exemplary evaluations. Multiple commendations. He tapped the folder thoughtfully. You were scheduled to retire before this last deployment. Yes, sir. My retirement was deferred for the mission. And now you're back on track to leave the service in approximately 60 days. Something in his tone made me sit straighter. That's correct. Sir. General Briggs leaned forward, hands clasped on his desk. I'm going to ask you a direct question, Captain, and I want a direct answer. No consideration for what you think I want to hear. Of course, sir. Are you retiring because you want to, or because you think it's expected? The question caught me off guard. I'd been preparing for retirement for so long that I'd stopped questioning the decision. It was simply the next phase, the natural progression after a full career. I suppose a bit of both, sir, I answered honestly. 25 years seems like a reasonable time to serve, and I've been looking forward to having more time with my daughter. Understandable. He nodded. But what if I told you there's an alternative? A position that would keep you in service, but provide more stability, less deployment, more stateside work? I'd be interested to hear more, sir. The general opened a different folder. The Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth is expanding its faculty. They need experienced officers to teach the next generation of leaders. Someone with practical logistics experience, someone who served in multiple theaters, someone who understands both the theory and reality of modern warfare. My pulse quickened. Teaching had always appealed to me. The chance to shape young officers, to pass on what I'd learned through trial and error, triumph and failure. It's a major's position, the general continued, which means promotion for you. 3-year commitment, renewable if both parties are satisfied. Housing provided on campus. Full benefits, of course. Sir, with respect, my promotion timeline has been accelerated in recognition of your last deployment. The paperwork is already in process. He slid a document across the desk. All that's needed is your signature. I stared at the paper, mind racing. A teaching position, a promotion, a new beginning rather than an ending. Why me, sir? General Briggs leaned back in his chair. Because you understand something many don't, Rick. Honor isn't just a word we throw around. It's a practice, a daily choice. His eyes held mine steadily. We need officers who can teach that. Not from a manual, but from experience. The offer was unexpected but undeniably appealing. Instead of stepping away from service, I could transform it, could contribute in a new way while still being part of the institution that had shaped my life. I'd like to discuss this with my daughter before deciding, I said finally. Of course. He nodded approvingly. Family should always be part of major decisions. Take 48 hours. The position doesn't begin for 3 months, which gives you time to wrap up here and relocate if you accept. As I left his office, my step was lighter than it had been in months. The future, which had seemed so definitively settled, now held new possibilities. I wasn't being put out to pasture. I was being offered a chance to grow in a different direction. I called Samantha immediately, arranging to meet for dinner. We needed neutral ground for this conversation, away from both my apartment with its lingering memories of Brandon's violation and her house with its fractured domesticity. We met at a small Italian restaurant off base, one we'd frequented during her high school years. She arrived looking tired but determined, the strain of the past week evident in the shadows beneath her eyes. You look like you have news, she said after we ordered, studying my face with the perceptiveness she'd inherited from her mother. I do, I explained. General Briggs's offer, watching her expression shift from surprise to thoughtful consideration. Fort Leavenworth, she mused. Kansas, right? That's not close. About a 7-hour drive, I confirmed. But flights are reasonable, and it would be a 3-year posting at least. Stability. She twirled pasta around her fork without eating it. I always pictured you retiring. Building that workshop you talked about. Finally having time for yourself. I thought that's what I wanted too, I admitted. But when the general made this offer, I realized I'm not ready to be done serving. Just done deploying. Samantha set her fork down, reaching across the table to take my hand. Dad, can I ask you something important? Something I've wondered for a long time? Anything, honey. Are you afraid of civilian life? Of not having the structure and purpose the Army gives you? The question struck deeper than she probably intended. I'd asked myself the same thing many times over the years. Whether my dedication to service was truly about sacrifice or secretly about avoiding the messier, less defined world outside military boundaries. Maybe, I admitted. The military has been my framework for so long. My compass. It's given me clear purpose, clear rules, clear goals. And civilian life is more ambiguous? Exactly. I squeezed her hand. But that's not the only reason this opportunity appeals to me. I genuinely believe I have something to offer these young officers, experience they can learn from. She nodded slowly. You do. You absolutely do. Her eyes, so like her mother's, studied me with gentle scrutiny. But I want you to be sure you're running toward something, not away from something. What do you mean? I mean, she hesitated. With everything that's happened with Brandon, with the apartment, with the disrespect you faced, are you sure this isn't about seeking refuge in what's familiar? In what's always respected you? I considered her words carefully. There was wisdom in them that belied her years. That's a fair question, I acknowledged. And I can't say it's not a factor, but it's not the deciding one. I leaned forward, choosing my words deliberately. Teaching at the staff college means I can still serve, still contribute, but in a way that also gives me room to build a life beyond the uniform. It feels like a bridge rather than a retreat. Samantha's expression softened. Then I think you should accept. She hesitated, then added, and selfishly, it might be good for both of us to have some geographic distance from recent events. She didn't need to elaborate. Fort Carson would always carry the shadow of Brandon's betrayal for both of us now. What about you? I asked. Your job, your friends, everything's here. She shrugged with a forced casualness that didn't quite mask her pain. I've already spoken to my boss about transferring to our Denver office. It's time for a fresh start. Her voice cracked slightly. The divorce papers have been filed. The house is going on the market next week. My heart ached for her, for this daughter who had already weathered the loss of her mother and was now facing another. Profound grief. I'm so sorry, Samantha. Don't be, she said firmly. This isn't your fault. And honestly, Dad, better to learn who he really is now than years down the road with kids involved. She attempted a smile. We Sawyers are resilient, right? It's in our DNA. We finished dinner talking of practical things, housing options in Leavenworth, the logistics of relocating, the timeline for my new position. But beneath the mundane details ran a current of something deeper, a shared understanding that we were both stepping into new chapters, leaving behind pain, but carrying forward the values that defined us. As we walked to our cars afterward, Samantha stopped suddenly, turning to face me. There's something else you should know, she said, her expression solemn. Something I learned yesterday. What is it? Brandon didn't just use your apartment for parties. She took a deep breath. He used your name to secure contracts for his friend's company, told vendors he had special access through his father-in-law, implied you were getting kickbacks. The revelation hit like a physical blow. How did you find this out? His former boss called me. Wanted to know if I was involved. Her eyes flashed with anger. Apparently, Brandon collected consulting fees for making introductions. Used your service record to establish credibility. I leaned against my car, processing this new betrayal. Not just disrespect now, but potentially criminal exploitation. The military police, I began. Already have the information, she finished. I spoke with them this morning. Gave them everything I know. I studied my daughter's face, the determined set of her jaw, the unflinching gaze. In that moment, I saw not just Margaret's features, but my own strength reflected back at me. You didn't have to do that, I said softly. He's still your husband, legally at least. No, Dad, I did have to do it. She stepped forward, embracing me tightly. Because honor isn't just your value, it's mine too. As I held her, I realized something profound. Whatever mistakes I'd made as a father, whatever moments I'd missed due to deployment, I had succeeded in the thing that mattered most. I had raised a daughter who understood integrity, who recognized its worth, who would fight to protect it, even at personal cost. That night, I called General Briggs and accepted the position at Fort Leavenworth, not as an escape from civilian uncertainty, not as a retreat to familiar territory, but as a deliberate choice to carry forward what I believed in, to help shape the officers who would lead long after my own service concluded. It wasn't the retirement I had planned. It was something better, a continuation of purpose, transformed for a new season of life. Sometimes I realized, honor isn't just about defending what was, it's about building what could be. 2 weeks after accepting the staff college position, I found myself in a small conference room at the Fort Carson Military Police Headquarters. Across the table sat Major Eleanor Vasquez, head of the base's Criminal Investigation Division, and a civilian from the Department of Defense Inspector General's office. Thank you for coming in, Captain Sawyer, Major Vasquez began, her tone professional, but sympathetic. We understand this is a difficult situation given the family connections involved. I'm here to assist in any way I can, I replied. The civilian, a sharp-eyed man in his 50s with the weathered look of a career investigator, opened a thick folder. Captain, we've been investigating financial irregularities in several base vendor contracts over the past 18 months. Your name has appeared in multiple contexts, though we now believe without your knowledge or consent. He laid out several documents, emails, contract bids, meeting minutes, all containing references to Captain Sawyer's recommendation or consultation with logistics expert Captain Sawyer. I've never seen these before, I stated firmly, examining the papers. Never authorized the use of my name or position. We believe you, Major Vasquez assured me. Your deployment timeline alone confirms you couldn't have been involved in most of these transactions. She slid another document forward, a bank statement showing regular deposits to an account in Brandon's name. Your son-in-law, however, received payments totaling just over $42,000 from 3 different contractors during this period. The amount staggered me. Brandon had leveraged my reputation, my 25 years of service, for personal profit, all while privately disdaining everything the uniform represented. We need to understand when this began, the DoD investigator continued. Was there ever a time when you authorized Cooper to represent your interests or speak on your behalf? I thought carefully, not wanting to inadvertently implicate myself through some forgotten conversation or casual comment. No, I helped him secure his position with Base Support Services 4 years ago. Made an introduction to the hiring manager. That was the extent of my involvement in his professional life. They nodded, making notes. And when did you become aware he was using your apartment during your deployment? Upon my return, April 27th, I had no prior knowledge. The questioning continued for nearly 2 hours. Methodical, thorough exploration of my relationship with Brandon, my knowledge of his activities, my own contracting experiences during my career. I answered honestly and completely, recognizing that full transparency was my best protection. Finally, Major Vasquez closed her notepad. Captain, based on our investigation and your statement today, we do not consider you a subject of this inquiry. You appear to be a victim of identity exploitation. What happens now? I asked. The DoD investigator gathered his papers. We continue building our case against Mr. Cooper and potentially several contractor representatives who participated in this scheme. Criminal charges are likely: fraud, misrepresentation, possibly conspiracy, depending on what evidence emerges. And my daughter? Will she be implicated in any way? Not based on current evidence, Major Vasquez assured me. Her statement to investigators last week was comprehensive and corroborated by other witnesses. She appears to have been unaware of her husband's activities. I nodded, relief mixing with lingering anger. The system was working as it should, methodically pursuing truth, separating the guilty from the innocent. But the process itself was painful, exposing family wounds to institutional scrutiny. As I left the building, my phone buzzed with a text from Samantha. House sold. Closing in 3 weeks. How's the apartment hunting in Leavenworth going? I smiled despite the weight of the morning's interview. Amid all the chaos, life was reorganizing itself, moving forward. Found a promising option near the campus, I replied. 2BR, so you'll always have a place to stay when you visit. Her response came quickly. Perfect. I've accepted the Denver transfer. Starting next month. New beginnings for both of us. Different cities, different paths, but moving in parallel, each reclaiming our lives after Brandon's betrayal. That evening, I met with General Briggs for what would likely be our last private conversation before my transfer to Fort Leavenworth. We sat in his office, the formality of rank temporarily set aside between old soldiers who had seen much together. The investigation is proceeding, I informed him. They've cleared me of any involvement. As expected, he nodded. Cooper's actions were his alone. Still, it's uncomfortable, having my name associated with this kind of scandal, even peripherally. The general regarded me thoughtfully. You know, Rick, in 25 years of service, you've built a reputation that can withstand this temporary association. The people who matter know who you are, and those who don't will learn. He smiled slightly. Your work at the staff college will speak for itself. We discussed my transition plans, the courses I would teach, the administrative responsibilities I would assume, the leadership philosophy I hope to impart to the next generation of officers. As our meeting concluded, the general rose from behind his desk. One more thing. Captain. His tone shifted, becoming more formal. I've taken the liberty of expediting your promotion paperwork. The ceremony will be next week before you depart. Sir, that's not necessary. He held up a hand, silencing my protest. It is necessary. Not just as recognition of your service, but as a statement. What happened here? The disrespect shown to your home, your reputation, your sacrifice will not be the final word. Your advancement will be. I stood straighter, deeply moved by this gesture of institutional respect. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, he warned with a hint of humor. Wait until you've graded your first stack of strategy papers from overconfident lieutenants. The following week passed in a blur of preparations. Packing my apartment, completing transfer. Paperwork, saying goodbyes to colleagues I'd served alongside for years. Through it all ran an undercurrent of anticipation, not anxiety. Each box sealed, each form signed, brought me closer to a new chapter I hadn't anticipated, but now embraced wholeheartedly. The promotion ceremony was small but dignified. General Briggs presided, Samantha pinned on my new rank, and a handful of officers I'd worked closely with attended. As the general read the promotion orders, I felt the weight of the moment, not just personal advancement, but institutional affirmation that honor recognized is honor rewarded. Major Richard Sawyer, General Briggs announced, using my full name and new rank. Continue to serve with the same distinction that has characterized your career thus far. Later, as Samantha. And I celebrated over dinner. She raised her glass in a toast. To Major Sawyer, Dad, I'm so proud of you. Thank you, honey. I clinked my glass against hers. Though I have to admit, It feels strange. I've been Captain Sawyer for so long. Well, now you're Major Sawyer. New rank, new posting, new start. She smiled, though sadness lingered at the edges. We're both getting fresh beginnings. I studied my daughter's face, the strength there, the resilience, the quiet dignity she maintained despite the public humiliation of Brandon's actions and the pending divorce. You know, your mother would be incredibly proud of how you're handling all this. I hope so. She set her glass down. Sometimes I wonder what she would say about the mess I've made. You haven't made a mess, I corrected. Gently. You trusted someone who proved unworthy of that trust. There's no shame in that. Isn't there? Her voice caught. I should have seen it, Dad. The disrespect he showed you. The comments he made about your service. I dismissed them as just political differences, but they were warning signs of something deeper. I reached across the table, taking her hand. Samantha, listen to me. You gave your marriage everything you had. You believed in your husband, supported his career, built a life together. The fact that he betrayed that says everything about him and nothing about you. She nodded, blinking back tears. I know that logically. It's just hard to feel it sometimes. It will come, I assured her. Not all at once, but gradually, as you rebuild. We finished dinner talking of lighter things, her new apartment in Denver, my upcoming courses at the staff college, the hiking trails in Kansas that wouldn't compare to Colorado's mountains, but might offer their own quiet beauty. As we walked to our cars afterward, Samantha hesitated, then asked, Have you heard anything more about the investigation? About Brandon? I considered how much to share, not wanting to reopen wounds. He's been formally charged, multiple counts of fraud, misrepresentation, illegal use of government information. Will there be a trial? Most likely not. The evidence is substantial. His attorney will probably negotiate a plea agreement. She nodded, absorbing this information with remarkable composure. Good. I don't want to testify. You may not have to. She looked up at the Colorado sky, stars emerging in the deepening blue. You know what's strange? I don't hate him. I'm angry, furiously, indescribably angry, but I don't wish him harm. I just want him to understand what he destroyed. Not just our marriage, but the trust of good people. Your reputation, his own integrity. Her words reminded me so powerfully of Margaret, her ability to seek understanding even in betrayal, to want accountability without vengeance. That, I said softly, is what real honor looks like. Not the absence of wounds, but the dignity with which you carry them. She hugged me tightly, this daughter who had grown into a woman of remarkable strength. I learned from the best, Dad. As she drove away, I stood in the parking lot, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Pride in Samantha, satisfaction in my promotion, lingering anger at Brandon, anticipation for Leavenworth. But beneath it all ran a current of profound certainty that we were both moving in the right direction, not running from pain, but walking deliberately toward renewal. Sometimes I realized honor isn't just defended in dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's rebuilt day by day, choice by choice, as you reclaim what was taken and transform it into something new. Fort Leavenworth in summer radiated a different energy than the mountain backdrop of Fort Carson. The Kansas landscape stretched in gentle undulations rather than dramatic peaks, the Missouri River curving languidly past the historic post. The air hung heavy with humidity, a stark contrast to Colorado's dry heat. My faculty quarters exceeded expectations. A two-bedroom duplex in a quiet neighborhood of similar homes, all occupied by instructors and their families. A modest front porch offered space for morning coffee or evening contemplation. The interior, while standard military housing in many respects, provided more room than my previous apartment. Major Sawyer? A voice called as I unloaded the last boxes from the moving truck. Welcome to Leavenworth. I turned to find a woman in her 50s approaching across the lawn, carrying a covered dish. I'm Ellen Reeves. My husband, Colonel Reeves, heads the leadership department. We're your neighbors. She nodded toward the adjoining duplex. Richard Sawyer, I replied, extending my hand. Pleased to meet you. I brought lasagna, she said, handing me the dish. Moving day tradition around. Here. No one should have to cook their first night in a new home. The simple gesture of neighborly welcome caught me off guard. After months of dealing with Brandon's betrayal and the subsequent investigation, this uncomplicated kindness felt almost foreign. That's extremely thoughtful. Thank you. Ellen smiled. Faculty housing is tight-knit. Most of us have been in service long enough to know the value of community. She glanced at my bare left hand. Will your family be joining you later? My daughter's in Denver, I explained. I'm widowed. It's just me. Understanding crossed her face without pity. The recognition of a fellow military spouse who knew loss was part of the life. Then you'll have to join us for Sunday dinners. Jim invites new faculty regularly. Combination. Mentorship and socialization. This week, perhaps? Once you're settled? I accepted gratefully, recognizing the importance of establishing connections in this new environment. As Ellen departed, promising to share the Faculty Spouse Network's unofficial guidebook to Leavenworth, I carried her lasagna inside, suddenly aware of how long it had been since anyone had cooked for me. The next morning, brought orientation at the Command and General Staff College, an imposing stone building that had educated military leaders since 1881. Walking through its historic corridors, I felt the weight of institutional legacy. Generations of officers had passed through these halls, learning the art of leadership before applying it across the globe. Colonel James Reeves, Ellen's husband, greeted me in the faculty wing. A tall, broad-shouldered man with salt and pepper hair, he exuded the calm authority of someone comfortable with his expertise. Major Sawyer, welcome aboard. His handshake was firm, his smile genuine. How was the move? Ellen mentioned she dropped by yesterday. Yes, sir. The lasagna was greatly appreciated. She's been feeding displaced officers for 20 years now. He chuckled. Come, let me show you your office and introduce you to the department. My office, while modest in size, featured large windows overlooking the parade ground. Bookshelves lined one wall, a desk and computer occupied another, and a small round table with 4 chairs stood ready for student consultations. You'll be teaching advanced logistics planning and ethical decision-making in combat operations, Colonel Reeves explained. 2 core courses for our majors track. Your deployments in multiple theaters made you an ideal candidate. Our students need instructors with recent field experience. He outlined the teaching schedule, departmental expectations, and evaluation criteria before introducing me to fellow faculty members, a mix of active duty officers, retired military, serving as civilian instructors and academic specialists without military backgrounds. Our strength is perspective diversity, Colonel Reeves emphasized. Military experience paired with academic rigor. Your students will challenge you as much as you challenge them. The remainder of the week disappeared in preparation, reviewing course materials, adapting lesson plans to incorporate my field experiences, learning the college's administrative systems. Each evening, I returned to my new quarters, gradually transforming the standard issue housing into something personal. I hung photographs of Samantha, placed Margaret's watercolor of Colorado mountains in the living room, and arranged my military memorabilia in the home office. Sunday evening found me at the Reeves home along with 2 other new faculty members and their spouses. Ellen proved a gracious hostess, creating an atmosphere that balanced professional collegiality with genuine warmth. So, Major Sawyer, one of the spouses asked during dinner, what brings you to teaching at this stage of your career? Most officers your age are either pushing toward higher command or preparing to retire. The question was innocent, asked without knowledge of the circumstances that had diverted my retirement plans. I considered how much to share. I was scheduled to retire, I acknowledged, but a mentor suggested I had more to contribute. Teaching offers the chance to serve without deployment while sharing experiences that might benefit the next generation of leaders. Colonel Reeves nodded approvingly. The best teachers are those who never plan to teach. They come with knowledge earned rather than prepared. The conversation shifted to other topics. Housing renovations, recommended restaurants in Leavenworth, strategies for engaging contemporary students whose technological expectations differed from previous generations. As the evening concluded, Colonel Reeves drew me aside. Richard, a word before you go. We stepped onto his back porch, the summer night humming with insects. I know about the situation at Fort Carson, he said quietly. General Briggs is an old friend. He shared the circumstances that led to your reassignment. I stiffened slightly. Sir, He raised a hand. This isn't a reprimand or concern. Quite the opposite. His expression was serious but kind. What happened to you, the violation of your home, the exploitation of your reputation, was unconscionable. But your response? That's precisely why we wanted you here. My response, sir? You handled it with dignity. pursued justice through proper channels, maintained your integrity throughout. He leaned against the porch railing. Those are exactly the qualities we need instructing future commanders. Theory is important, but character is essential. Relief washed through me, not because I feared judgment, but because Colonel Reeves understood what the experience had meant. Not just a personal affront, but a test of the values I'd built my career upon. Thank you, sir. I appreciate your perspective. One more thing. He lowered his voice further. The case against your former son-in-law has concluded. Guilty plea, 3 years probation, financial restitution, permanent debarment from government contracting. The news triggered complex emotions, satisfaction that justice had been served, lingering anger at the damage done, concern for Samantha. How did you learn this? JAG notification. Since you were listed as a victim in the case, I received the update as your commanding officer. He studied my expression. Is this welcome news? I considered the question carefully. Justice is always welcome. Vindication less important than verification that the system works. Colonel Reeves nodded slowly. A very instructor-like answer, Major. His mouth quirked in a half-smile. You'll do well here. My first class began the following week. 24 majors and lieutenant colonels, all experienced. Officers selected for advanced education. They watched with the polite skepticism reserved for any new instructor, evaluating whether my knowledge warranted their attention. I began not with introductions or syllabus review, but with a question. When does logistics cease being a support function and become a strategic capability? A lieutenant colonel in the front row, airborne tab visible on his shoulder, answered immediately. When supply lines determine operational tempo rather than merely sustaining it. Good start, I acknowledged. Anyone else? Hands raised throughout the room. The discussion that followed revealed sharp minds with varying perspectives, some shaped by Afghanistan's mountainous isolation, others by Iraq's urban complexity, still others by humanitarian missions where logistics meant literal survival for civilian populations. I guided rather than lectured, drawing out their experiences, connecting their observations to historical precedents, challenging oversimplifications. By the session's end, the initial skepticism had transformed into engaged participation. As they filed out, the lieutenant colonel who had spoken first lingered. Sir, may I ask a personal question? Certainly. You were with the 4th Infantry Division at Fort Carson, correct? My brother serves there. Said something about a scandal involving a civilian contractor using an officer's credentials. My stomach tightened. Of course, word had spread within military circles. The Army, for all its size, functions as a small community when it comes to notable incidents. Yes, I confirmed. Simply. I was involved in that situation. He nodded, respect evident in his expression. My brother said the officer handled it with remarkable restraint, that despite significant provocation, he maintained military bearing throughout. He hesitated. Was that you, sir? I neither confirmed nor denied, merely stating, the situation was resolved appropriately through proper channels. Understood, sir. He straightened slightly. Looking forward to your course. As he departed, I realized the incident would likely follow me, not as a stain, but as a case study in professional conduct. How I had responded to Brandon's disrespect and exploitation had become part of my reputation, for better or worse. That evening, I called Samantha to share news of my first teaching day and inquire about her transition to Denver. The apartment's coming together, she reported. New job starts Monday. How's Kansas? Flatter than Colorado, I chuckled. But the people are welcoming. The teaching is more engaging than I expected. Of course it is, she said with familiar confidence in my abilities. Those students are lucky to have you. I hesitated, then added, I heard about Brandon's sentencing today. The line went quiet for a moment. Yeah, she finally responded. My lawyer called yesterday. 3 years probation, restitution payments, career basically over. How do you feel about it? Honestly? She sighed. Relieved it's finished. Ready to close that chapter completely. Her voice strengthened. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About honor being not just what you defend, but what you build. That's what I'm focusing on now. Building something new. Pride swelled in my chest. Not just for her resilience, but for her wisdom. You're going to be fine, Samantha. Better than fine. We both are, Dad. As we said goodnight, I realized something profound had shifted. The anger that had simmered since discovering Brandon in my apartment had finally dissipated. Not because justice had been served, or because my reputation had been restored, but because both Samantha and I had transcended the betrayal, had refused to let it define our futures. Sometimes vindication comes not from punishment of wrongdoers, but from the triumph of continuing forward with dignity intact. Sometimes the greatest victory is simply becoming more fully yourself despite others' attempts to diminish you. I slept soundly that night for the first time in months, ready to embrace this unexpected new chapter, not as an escape from what had happened, but as affirmation of who I had always been. September brought cooler temperatures and established routines. My classes had hit their stride, the initial awkwardness between new instructor and skeptical students giving way to productive intellectual engagement. I found unexpected satisfaction in teaching, in watching comprehension dawn across a student's face when complex concepts finally aligned into clarity. "Major Sawyer," Colonel Reeves remarked after observing one of my lectures, "you've got a natural gift for this. The way you connected the Somalia intervention's logistics failures to current operational planning was masterful." "Thank you, sir. I'm still learning the craft." "All good teachers are perpetual students," he replied. "That's what makes them effective." Life at Fort Leavenworth settled into comfortable rhythms. Sunday dinners with the Reeves became regular fixtures. I joined a small group of faculty members for weekly runs along the Missouri River. My quarters gradually accumulated. The small touches that transform housing into home, books organized by subject rather than regulation, a handmade quilt Samantha sent as a housewarming gift, photographs of my new colleagues alongside family pictures. Samantha thrived in Denver, her periodic calls revealing increasing confidence and rebuilding happiness. The divorce finalized without drama, Brandon having neither resources nor inclination to contest anything after his legal troubles. She joined a hiking club, made new friends, began tentatively dating again. "There's this guy in my building," she mentioned during one call. "Environmental engineer. Nice, in that understated way. Asked me to coffee 3 times before I finally said yes." "And?" I prompted, careful to sound supportive without pressing. "And we're taking it very slowly. He knows I'm recently divorced. Doesn't push." I heard the smile in her voice. "He asked about you, what you do, where you're stationed. Said his grandfather taught at West Point. Military family?" "Not exactly. His grandfather was a civilian professor, mathematics, but he speaks respectfully about service, understands what it means." The contrast with Brandon remained unspoken, but evident. This new man, whoever he was, recognized the value in what Brandon had mocked. October brought midterm evaluations and an unexpected invitation, the annual Command and Staff College formal dinner, a tradition dating back decades. Faculty, distinguished graduates, and selected current students gathered for an evening of professional networking disguised as social interaction. "Attendance is expected," Colonel Reeves informed me. "Dress blues, full decorations. Spouses traditionally attend." I hadn't worn my dress uniform since the promotion ceremony at Fort Carson. The thought of attending alone while colleagues brought partners created momentary discomfort, but I dismissed it as irrational. Widowed officers were hardly uncommon in military circles. "I understand, sir. I'll be there." The evening of the dinner, I stood before my bedroom mirror, adjusting the precisely aligned rows of ribbons and medals that chronicled 25 years of service. The new major's oak leaves gleamed on my shoulders, still carrying the unfamiliarity of recent promotion. The man reflected back at me, graying at the temples, lines etched around the eyes, bore little resemblance to the young lieutenant who had first donned the uniform with such earnest determination. The college's main hall had been transformed for the occasion, round tables elegantly set, soft lighting creating an atmosphere of dignified celebration. The institution's historic artifacts displayed with particular prominence. Senior officers mingled with esteemed alumni, spouses engaged in the practiced social choreography unique to military functions. Colonel Reeves intercepted me near the entrance, Ellen on his arm in an elegant navy dress. "Richard, excellent. There's someone I'd like you to meet." He guided me toward a small group near the historical display cases. "General Harrison, may I present Major Richard Sawyer, our newest logistics and ethics instructor. Major General William Harrison, class of '83, current Deputy Commander of Army Materiel Command." The general, silver-haired, ramrod straight despite his 60-plus years, extended his hand. "Major Sawyer, Jim speaks highly of your practical approach to logistics instruction." "Thank you, sir." It's an honor to meet you. Harrison is evaluating our curriculum for alignment with current operational needs, Colonel Reeves explained. I thought your perspective would be valuable to his assessment. The conversation that followed was comfortable professional territory. Discussions of supply chain vulnerability in contested environments, integration of new technologies into traditional logistics frameworks, ethical challenges of resource allocation during simultaneous operations. As the group shifted toward dinner tables, General Harrison leaned closer. Colonel Reeves mentioned you were at Fort Carson before this assignment. Were you there during that unfortunate business with the civilian contractor misusing an officer's credentials? The question, though professionally asked, reminded me that military circles retain stories like shells preserve echoes of the ocean. Yes, sir. I was directly involved in that situation. Recognition flashed in his eyes. You were the officer? I was, sir. He nodded slowly. That case has become something of a teaching point at higher levels. Exemplary restraint in the face of personal and professional violation. Proper utilization of chain of command rather than inappropriate direct action. I simply followed protocol, sir. Which is precisely what makes it noteworthy, Major. A slight smile softened his formal demeanor. In an era when many seek personal vindication through unofficial channels, your adherence to proper process while under significant stress speaks volumes about your character. The general's words, while gratifying, triggered complex emotions. The incident that had nearly derailed my career had apparently enhanced my professional reputation in ways I never anticipated. Brandon's disrespect, meant to diminish me, had instead become evidence of my commitment to military values. Dinner proceeded with formal precision. Multi-course service, carefully selected wines, speeches celebrating the college's legacy and current excellence. I participated in table conversation, answered questions about my courses, engaged in the expected professional. Socializing. As the evening concluded, Colonel Reeves appeared at my side. Richard, before you leave, there's someone else eager to meet you. A late arrival. He gestured toward the entrance where a familiar figure stood, scanning the room. Samantha, elegant in a simple black dress, her expression brightening as she spotted me. Surprise, she called, crossing the room to embrace me. Did it work? Were you surprised? I hugged her tightly, genuinely astonished. Completely. What are you doing here? Colonel Reeves contacted me, she explained. Said faculty families were welcome at the dinner, that you might appreciate having someone here. I glanced at Colonel Reeves, who smiled with satisfaction at his successful orchestration. Thank you, sir. This is unexpected. Ellen's idea, actually, he admitted, said no one should attend their first college formal alone if family could possibly be present. After he departed to attend to other guests, I turned back to Samantha. You flew all the way from Denver for a dinner. For you, she corrected. And I took a few days off. Thought I might finally see this apartment you've been talking about. She linked her arm through mine. Besides, I've never attended a military formal before. Figured it was time to see this part of your world. She fit seamlessly into the evening, charming senior officers, engaging thoughtfully with faculty spouses, displaying the social grace her mother had possessed. Watching her move confidently through this military setting, I realized how much she had matured through recent hardships. Not just recovering, but emerging stronger, more self-assured. Later, as we walked back to my quarters through the autumn night, leaves crunching beneath our feet, Samantha grew contemplative. You know what struck me tonight? How much respect these people have for you. Not just professional courtesy, but genuine admiration. They're colleagues, I demurred. Military courtesy is part of the culture. No, Dad, it's more than that. She stopped beneath a street lamp, its light illuminating her earnest expression. When they talk about you, especially the ones who know about what happened at Fort Carson, there's this undertone of, I don't know, reverence almost. That's overstating things considerably. It's not. She resumed walking, arms wrapped against the evening chill. Brandon used to say the military was just play acting at honor, that it was all performance without substance. But tonight I saw the real thing, how these people live by a code that actually means something. The observation hung between us, her recognition of the very values Brandon had mocked, the principles that had guided my life and career. I'm sorry I didn't see it clearly before, she added softly. How important that was. How fundamental to who you are. You have nothing to apologize for, I assured her. You were caught between loyalty to your husband and respect for your father. An impossible position. Still, She stopped at the steps to my quarters. I should have recognized sooner that someone who could disrespect your service so fundamentally couldn't possibly be the person I thought he was. I unlocked the door, ushering her inside from the growing cold. We all have blind spots when it comes to those we love. It's part of being human. Samantha spent 3 days with me, exploring Leavenworth's historic downtown, attending one of my classes as an observer, helping rearrange furniture to make my quarters more functional. We cooked together, reminisced about Margaret, discussed her tentative new relationship with the environmental engineer, whose name I learned was Thomas. On her final evening, we sat on my small porch, watching twilight settle over the historic post. "Dad," she said after a comfortable silence, "are you happy here?" The question caught me off guard, not because I hadn't considered it, but because happiness had seemed secondary to duty for so long that I rarely evaluated my life through that lens. "I am," I realized aloud, "not in a constant euphoria way, but in a satisfied way. Purpose, contribution, community." She nodded thoughtfully. "I can see it. You found your place." "Have you? In Denver?" "Getting there." Her smile was genuine if still touched with healing shadows. Each day feels a little more like building something rather than recovering from something. Progress. As twilight deepened into true darkness, stars emerging above the Kansas plains, I recognized the symmetry of our journeys. Father and daughter, moving forward from betrayal, each reconstructing life on firmer foundations. "You know," Samantha said as we finally moved inside, "Brandon thought he was diminishing you, showing that your rank, your service didn't matter, but he accomplished exactly the opposite." "How so?" "He revealed the truth. That honor isn't just words or symbols or traditions." She gestured toward my uniform hanging in preparation for morning classes. "It's choices, actions, the person you are when no one's looking and when everyone is." The insight struck me as profound, not just about military service, but about life itself. Honor wasn't the medals or the rank or the uniform. It was the invisible architecture that supported everything else. The next morning, I drove Samantha to the airport, both of us promising more frequent visits now that we'd established the pattern. As I watched her disappear through security, I felt not the familiar ache of separation, but a calm certainty that we were both exactly where we needed to be, moving forward, not defined by past wounds but strengthened by them. Driving back to Fort Leavenworth, autumn colors painting the countryside in russet and gold, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. Not retirement as planned, not continuation of my previous role, but something unexpected and ultimately more meaningful. The chance to transform experience, even painful experience, into wisdom others could use. Brandon Cooper had sought to diminish me, to reduce 25 years of service to meaningless ritual. Instead, he had inadvertently revealed its true value, not in power or authority, but in the steady commitment to something larger than oneself, even when that commitment comes at personal cost. Sometimes I realized honor is most clearly defined not when it's celebrated, but when it's challenged. Winter descended on Fort Leavenworth with impressive efficiency, transforming the Kansas landscape into a canvas of whites and grays. The historic buildings stood stark against leaden skies, their stone facades seeming to absorb the cold rather than resist it. Having spent years in Colorado, I was no stranger to winter, but the Kansas version carried its own distinctive character, less dramatic than mountain snowstorms, but persistent in its grip. My first semester of teaching concluded with surprisingly positive student evaluations. Colonel Reeves presented the results during our departmental review. "Your practical experience resonates strongly," he noted, displaying the anonymous feedback. "Several students specifically mentioned your ability to connect theoretical frameworks with real-world applications." "That's gratifying to hear," I acknowledged, genuinely pleased that my approach had connected with these experienced officers. One comment in particular stands out. He highlighted a paragraph on his tablet. "Major Sawyer doesn't just teach logistic systems. He demonstrates the ethical framework that must underpin them. His personal integrity informs his instruction in ways that textbooks cannot replicate." The comment caught me off guard, not because I disagreed, but because I hadn't consciously integrated my personal experiences into my teaching. Apparently, the lessons learned through Brandon's betrayal had seeped into my instruction more visibly than I'd realized. As classes broke for winter holidays, I prepared for a quiet period on the nearly deserted campus. Samantha had invited me to Denver for Christmas, but a major snowstorm across the Midwest made travel impossible. We settled for video calls, promising to reschedule our celebration when weather permitted. On Christmas Eve, as I was arranging a modest dinner for myself, a knock interrupted my solitude. Opening the door revealed Ellen Reeves, bundled against the cold, carrying a covered dish. "No one spends Christmas Eve alone in faculty housing," she announced, brushing past me into the warmth. "Jim's stuck on campus with the few international students who couldn't travel home. I'm collecting strays." Her matter-of-fact kindness brooked no argument. Within an hour, I found myself at the Reeves home along with 3 other faculty members separated from family by weather or circumstance. The evening unfolded with surprising warmth, shared stories, excellent food, a genuine sense of camaraderie that transcended our professional relationships. As the gathering dispersed, Ellen pressed leftovers into my hands. "For tomorrow," she insisted, "though you're expected here at 2 for Christmas dinner." "That's very kind, but not optional, Richard," she interrupted with gentle firmness. "Military families take care of each other. That includes faculty." Walking home through softly falling snow, I realized how thoroughly I had integrated into this community in just a few months. After Brandon's violation of my home and exploitation of my service, I had unconsciously braced for further disrespect. Instead, I'd found the opposite. Colleagues who valued the very things Brandon had mocked, who understood service as something honorable rather than exploitable. The new year brought an unexpected development. An email from the Judge Advocate General's office requested my presence at Fort Carson in February. "Final disposition of evidence in Cooper matter," the message stated cryptically. "Personal items recovered, requiring identification by rightful owner." I hadn't anticipated further involvement in Brandon's case. The legal proceedings had concluded months earlier with his guilty plea and sentencing. What personal items could possibly require my physical presence to reclaim? Colonel Reeves approved my temporary leave without hesitation. "Take whatever time you need," he said. "Your classes can be covered for a week if necessary." I arranged to meet Samantha in Colorado Springs, using the required trip as an opportunity for the visit we'd missed at Christmas. She met me at the airport, her smile brighter than I remembered, a new confidence in her bearing that suggested Denver continued to be the right environment for her healing. "You look well," I observed as we navigated the familiar drive toward Fort Carson. "I am well," she confirmed. "Work is challenging in the best ways. I've made good friends. And Thomas?" She hesitated, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "Thomas is patient and kind. We're taking things slowly, but it's promising." "I'm glad to hear it. You deserve happiness, Samantha." She glanced at me. "So do you, Dad." The JAG office at Fort Carson looked exactly as I remembered. Utilitarian, efficient, the atmosphere of quiet competence that characterizes military legal operations. Major Vasquez, who had interviewed me during the initial investigation, greeted us in the lobby. "Major Sawyer, thank you for coming." She nodded respectfully to Samantha. "Ms. Sawyer, I appreciate your presence as well. This matter concerns both of you." She led us to a conference room where several boxes sat on a central table. During execution of the search warrant on Mr. Cooper's storage unit, we recovered numerous items that appear to have been removed from your base apartment during your deployment. I approached the boxes with mixed emotions, curiosity about what Brandon had taken, anger at the violation, resignation that the past continued to intrude. Despite my efforts to move forward, "We need you to identify what belongs to you and complete chain of custody documentation," Major Vasquez explained, opening the first box. Inside were items I had assumed lost during my deployment or discarded during Brandon's occupation of my apartment, books from my personal collection, several framed photographs that had disappeared from walls, a small wooden box containing Margaret's wedding ring that I had planned to give Samantha on her 30th birthday. "He took Mom's ring?" Samantha's voice cracked with renewed outrage. "Why would he?" "It appears Mr. Cooper removed items of both monetary and sentimental value," Major Vasquez said carefully. "The storage unit contained numerous items we've traced to other victims as well." "Other victims?" I looked up sharply. "There were others?" Major Vasquez hesitated, then nodded. "Mr. Cooper's pattern of behavior extended beyond your situation. We've identified 3 other military families whose homes or possessions were misused during deployments." The revelation stunned me. Brandon's exploitation hadn't been merely personal, hadn't been simply about disrespecting me or my service. It had been systematic, predatory, targeting multiple families who shared the vulnerability of separation during deployment. Did they know? Samantha asked, voice tight with emotion. The other families? Did they know what he was doing? Some suspected unauthorized access to their quarters. Others had no idea until we contacted them. Major Vasquez's expression softened slightly. Your case broke the, pattern, Major Sawyer. Your report led to the investigation that ultimately uncovered the broader exploitation. We spent 2 hours cataloging recovered items, signing affidavits, completing the necessary documentation to reclaim possessions that should never have been taken. Throughout the process, I watched Samantha struggle with renewed grief and anger, not just at the violation of our home, but at the revelation of Brandon's more extensive betrayals. Later, in the privacy of her rental car, she finally broke. I can't believe I didn't see it, she sobbed, hands gripping the steering wheel though we remained parked in the Fort Carson lot. How could I have been so blind? So completely deceived? I reached across to hold her shaking shoulders. Samantha, listen to me. Brandon was deliberately deceptive. He compartmentalized his life precisely to prevent you from seeing the whole truth. But I should have known. There must have been signs. There likely were, I acknowledged gently. But we see what we expect to see, especially with those we love. It's human nature, not personal failure. She wiped her eyes, visibly struggling to regain composure. The other families, they were victims because of me, because I brought him into their world. No, I said firmly. They were victims because Brandon chose to exploit vulnerable people. His actions are his responsibility alone. We sat in silence for several minutes, the recovered box containing Margaret's ring resting between us on the console, a physical reminder of what had been taken and now returned. You know what hurts most? Samantha finally said, her voice steadier. Not just that he betrayed me, betrayed us, but that he targeted the very people who deserve the most protection. Families already sacrificing through separation. I nodded, understanding completely. Military families endure unique hardships. The uncertainty of deployment, the strain of separation, the constant rebuilding of life with each new assignment. They rely on mutual respect and support from within the military community to weather these challenges. Brandon had violated that fundamental trust. What do we do now? She asked. I considered the question carefully. We return to our lives, continue building what we've started, but perhaps we also consider how to strengthen the protections for deployed service members and their families. Her expression shifted, interest replacing despair. What do you mean? The system worked eventually in our case, but too late to prevent harm. There might be ways to improve oversight, increase security, create better verification processes. As we drove back to her apartment, the conversation evolved from personal grief to practical problem solving. Samantha, with her organizational background, suggested potential procedural improvements. I contributed insights from my military experience. By the time we arrived, the outline of a formal proposal had taken shape. I could draft this properly, she offered, as we carried the recovered items inside. Create a structured recommendation that addresses the vulnerabilities Brandon exploited. That would be valuable, I agreed. I could present it through command channels at Leavenworth. The staff college has direct lines to policymakers. The next morning, we began work in earnest. Samantha at her laptop, me with notepad and pen, our dining table covered with outlines and reference materials. What had begun as a painful revisiting of past betrayal transformed into constructive action, a way to extract meaning from suffering, by preventing others from experiencing similar violations. By the end of my week in Colorado, we had produced a comprehensive proposal, securing the home front, enhanced protections for deployed service members' residences and families. The document outlined specific vulnerabilities in current systems and recommended practical solutions, from improved verification protocols for housing access to regular welfare checks on deployed service members' properties. This is excellent work, I told Samantha as we reviewed the final draft. Substantive, practical, implementable within existing frameworks. She smiled, a genuine expression untainted by the sadness that had marked our earlier interactions. It feels good, doesn't it? Taking something painful and creating something useful from it. It does, I agreed. That's resilience in its truest form, not just recovering, but transforming experience into wisdom that benefits others. As I prepared to return to Fort Leavenworth, Samantha walked with me to her door, the box containing her mother's ring held carefully in her hands. "Dad," she said hesitantly, "would it be all right if I kept this now? Even though I'm not 30 yet?" Smiled, touched by the request. "Of course. It was always meant for you." She opened the wooden box, lifting the simple gold band Margaret had worn throughout our marriage. "I remember how she would twist it when she was thinking deeply," she said softly. 3 turns clockwise, then back. She claimed it helped her thought process, I recalled. Never could explain how. Samantha slipped the ring onto the chain she wore around her neck, where it nestled alongside a small pendant Thomas had given her for Christmas. "Now I'll have both of you with me, the past and the future." The symbolism wasn't lost on me. My daughter integrating her heritage with her emerging new life, carrying forward what deserved preservation while creating space for new possibilities. "I'm proud of you, Samantha," I said, embracing her before departing. "Not just for surviving what happened, but for how you've grown through it." "I had a good example," she replied, squeezing me tightly. "A father who showed me what honor really means, not in grand gestures, but in daily choices." Returning to Fort Leavenworth, I carried both recovered possessions and renewed purpose. The proposal Samantha and I had crafted found receptive audiences. First Colonel Reeves, then his superiors, eventually reaching the policy development team at Army Personnel Command. Within months, a pilot program implementing many of our recommendations was approved for testing at 3 installations, including Fort Carson. What had begun as a personal violation had generated protections that would benefit countless military families. Brandon's attempt to diminish the value of military service had inadvertently strengthened the systems supporting those who serve. Sometimes, I reflected as spring gradually reclaimed Kansas from winter's grip, honor is most powerfully demonstrated not in victory over adversaries, but in transforming injury into improvement, using even the most painful experiences to create something that serves others. As my first academic year at the Staff College neared its conclusion, I incorporated these insights into my ethics curriculum, not by sharing the personal details of Brandon's betrayal, but by examining how institutions can respond to breaches of trust in ways that strengthen rather than weaken their fundamental values. The measure of an organization's integrity, I told my students during our final ethics seminar, isn't the absence of violations, it's the response when violations occur. Do we simply punish offenders, or do we examine and improve the systems that allowed the violation to happen? A lieutenant colonel raised her hand. "Sir, is that why the new housing security protocols were implemented? As a systemic response rather than just individual." "Accountability?" "Exactly," I confirmed, privately proud of the connection to the initiative Samantha and I had launched. Individual accountability matters, but system improvement creates lasting protection. As the students filed out after final evaluations, I felt a deep satisfaction that transcended personal vindication. The lessons extracted from betrayal had become tools for strengthening the institution I had served for 25 years, ensuring that other families might be spared similar pain. Honor, I had come to understand, isn't just about defending what is valuable. Sometimes it's about transforming painful experience into protection for others. Sometimes the most dignified response to disrespect isn't retaliation, but renovation, building something better from the broken pieces. 18 months after my arrival at Fort Leavenworth, life had settled into rhythms that felt both comfortable and purposeful. My teaching had evolved from cautious adherence to curriculum, to confident integration of personal experience and academic theory. Student evaluations consistently praised the practical relevance of my courses. Colonel Reeves had entrusted me with developing a new, advanced seminar on ethical leadership in complex operations. Beyond professional accomplishments, I had established genuine connections within the faculty community. Sunday dinners with the Reeves continued. A small group of us gathered regularly for poker nights where the stakes were laughably small but the camaraderie invaluable. I'd even begun mentoring several junior faculty members, finding unexpected satisfaction in guiding their teaching development. Samantha flourished in Denver, her career advancing steadily. Her relationship with Thomas had deepened into something solid and nurturing. During her visits to Leavenworth, she spoke of him with the quiet confidence of someone who had found a partner who truly respected her, who saw her strength and supported her growth rather than attempting to diminish either. The proposal we had developed following the recovery of stolen items had expanded beyond its pilot program into standard procedure at multiple installations. A presentation I gave at a logistics conference about the initiative earned unexpected attention from senior command. resulting in an invitation to brief the Army Chief of Staff during his visit to the staff. College. Your work on deployed family security protocols has made a significant difference, General Mitchell commented after my briefing. We've seen a 30% reduction in reported incidents of unauthorized access to military housing during deployment since implementation. Thank you, sir. I'm gratified to hear that. I understand there's a personal connection to your interest in this issue, he added, his expression indicating knowledge of the circumstances that had brought me to Leavenworth. Yes, sir. My family experienced a breach of trust that revealed systemic vulnerabilities. He nodded thoughtfully. The best improvements often emerge from personal experience. You and your daughter transformed a private hardship into public benefit. That's commendable. His recognition of Samantha's contribution particularly pleased me. She had continued refining the protocols even after our initial proposal, applying her organizational expertise to strengthen verification procedures and communication systems. As my second academic year at the Staff College concluded, Colonel Reeves called me into his office for what I assumed would be a routine end-of-term review. Instead, he presented an unexpected opportunity. The Pentagon is establishing a new office focused on service member and family quality of life, he explained. They're seeking a senior officer with both operational experience and demonstrated commitment to military family welfare to serve as deputy director. Sounds like an important initiative, I observed. It is, and your name has been suggested as a candidate. He slid a folder across his desk. Based on your work here and the deployed family security protocols you developed. I stared at the folder, momentarily speechless. A Pentagon position represented career advancement I hadn't imagined possible after the detour that brought me to Leavenworth. This would mean leaving teaching, I said, thinking aloud. Yes, though your experience as an instructor would be relevant to the policy development aspects of the role. Colonel Reeves leaned forward. Richard, I'd hate to lose you from faculty. You've become a valuable member of our team, but this position aligns perfectly with the work you've already begun, expanding protections for military families, ensuring service members can focus on their missions knowing their loved ones are secure. I opened the folder, scanning the position description. The role would involve coordinating across service branches, working with family advocacy organizations, developing comprehensive policies addressing everything from housing security to educational support for military children. I'd need time to consider this, I said finally. Of course, they're not expecting an immediate answer, but they are hoping to interview candidates within the next month. I left his office with the folder tucked under my arm, mind racing with implications. A move to Washington would mean leaving the community I'd built at Leavenworth, would mean another relocation just as I'd established roots, would mean new challenges, new pressures, new responsibilities. That evening, I called Samantha to share the unexpected development. The Pentagon? Her voice carried equal measures of surprise and pride. Dad, that's incredible recognition. It's certainly unexpected, I acknowledged. I came to Leavenworth thinking I was one step from retirement. Now this. Are you considering it seriously? I am. I settled into my porch chair, watching twilight gather over the historic campus. The position would allow me to expand the work we started with the housing security protocols, develop comprehensive support systems for military families facing all kinds of challenges. It sounds perfect for you, she said thoughtfully, combining your military experience with your commitment to taking care of people. Perhaps, but it would mean leaving teaching, which I've grown to enjoy more than I anticipated. Would mean another move just as I've settled here. Dad, Samantha's voice gentled. What's really holding you back? Is it the change itself, or something deeper? Her perceptiveness, so like her mother's, cut through my circling thoughts to the core uncertainty. I suppose, I admitted slowly, I'm wondering if I'm the right person for this role. If my experience with Brandon, with the violation of our family, gives me insight or creates bias. Why not both, she suggested. The best advocates often come from personal experience. They understand both the emotional impact and the practical needs because they've lived them. You sound like your mother, I said, smiling at the memory of Margaret's practical wisdom. I'll take that as the highest compliment possible. I heard the smile in her voice. For what it's worth, I think you should pursue this. Not because it's a prestigious position, but because you could make a real difference for families like ours, families who sacrifice daily for service. After we hung up, I sat on my porch until full darkness descended, weighing options, considering implications. The Pentagon position would be demanding, would thrust me into policy realms I had limited experience navigating. But it would also allow me to address systemic vulnerabilities I understood intimately, to help protect families from the very violations mine had experienced. The following week, I scheduled an interview for the position. The process was rigorous: multiple panels, extensive questioning about my experience and vision, detailed discussions of how I would approach complex policy challenges. Throughout, I drew on both my military career and the painful lessons learned through Brandon's betrayal, transforming personal experience into professional insight. 3 weeks later, Colonel Reeves called me into his office, his expression unreadable. "I've just received word from the Pentagon," he said as I took a seat. "About the deputy director position." I nodded, bracing for either outcome. "They've selected you, Richard. They were particularly impressed by your ability to translate personal experience into systemic improvement without allowing emotional involvement to cloud your judgment." Mixed emotions washed through me: pride in the recognition, sadness at leaving Leavenworth sooner than anticipated, apprehension about the challenges ahead. When would they expect me to start? 3 months. Time to complete this academic term and relocate. He extended his hand. "Congratulations, Richard. This is well-deserved recognition of your character and capabilities." As news of my selection spread through faculty, I received congratulations tinged with genuine regret at my impending departure. Ellen Reeves organized a farewell dinner, gathering colleagues who had become friends during my relatively brief tenure. "You've made a lasting impact here," Colonel Reeves said during his toast. "Not just through your teaching, but through your example. Your students and colleagues have witnessed how personal integrity translates into professional excellence." The weeks before my departure passed quickly. Final classes to teach, mentoring responsibilities to transition, an apartment to pack yet again. Samantha flew in to help with the move and to celebrate the new opportunity. "I'm so proud of you, Dad," she said as we sorted through belongings, deciding what would make the journey to Washington. "Taking something that could have broken you and using it to build something better instead." "I had help," I reminded her, squeezing her shoulder affectionately. "Your resilience inspired mine." She smiled, holding up a framed photograph of the 3 of us, Samantha, Margaret, and me, taken during a rare family vacation when Samantha was 12. "Should this go in your office at the Pentagon? A reminder of why the work matters?" "Perfect placement," I agreed. My final day at Fort Leavenworth dawned clear and warm, early summer sunlight gilding the historic buildings. I walked the campus one last time, appreciating the beauty of the place that had offered unexpected healing and purpose after Brandon's betrayal. Colonel Reeves met me for a final coffee in his office, our professional relationship having evolved into genuine friendship. "You know," he said as we settled into our chairs, "when General Briggs recommended you for faculty, he mentioned the circumstances at Fort Carson, said you'd handled a difficult situation with remarkable dignity. He was very supportive during that time," I acknowledged. "What he saw, what I've seen during your time here, is something increasingly rare. Someone who responds to disrespect not with reactive anger but with principled action." He leaned back, studying me thoughtfully. "That's precisely why you're the right person for this Pentagon position. You understand that true honor isn't about retaliation when wronged. It's about restoration, about building systems that reflect our highest values rather than our basest instincts." His words crystallized something I had felt but struggled to articulate, that the journey from Brandon's invasion of my apartment to this new role at the Pentagon represented not just personal healing, but institutional renewal. The military values Brandon had mocked were precisely the principles that had guided my response to his betrayal, and ultimately led to improvements that would benefit countless service members and their families. The drive to Washington took 3 days, following a route that allowed me to stop in Denver and spend an evening with Samantha and Thomas. Their relationship had blossomed into something solid and nurturing, his quiet respect for her strength a stark contrast to Brandon's attempts to diminish her. "We're thinking about moving in together," she confided as we sat on her apartment balcony after dinner, Thomas having tactfully excused himself to give us privacy. "That's a significant step," I observed, careful to sound supportive rather than concerned. "It is, but unlike last time, I'm not rushing." She twisted her mother's ring, now permanently on her necklace. "I'm paying attention to actions more than words, to consistent respect rather than grand gestures. Thomas seems like a good man." "He is, and not because he's perfect, but because he's honest. About his strengths and, his flaws? She smiled. He asked about you, about your new position. Said it must be a point of pride for me to see my father recognized at such a level. And is it? Yes, she said simply, but not because of the rank or the title. Because of who you are, the man who taught me that true dignity isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise afterward. My arrival in Washington coincided with a congressional hearing on military family support programs, a fitting introduction to my new role. My first official act as deputy director was to testify about the housing security protocols Samantha and I had developed, explaining how they addressed vulnerabilities exploited by those who would take advantage of deployed service members' families. Major Sawyer, one representative, asked during questioning, what inspired such detailed attention to these particular security concerns? I paused, considering how much personal information to share in this public forum. Direct experience, Congressman. My family experienced unauthorized access to military housing during my deployment. That violation revealed systemic vulnerabilities our protocols now address. I see. He nodded, thoughtfully. So, you've transformed personal hardship into institutional improvement. That's the goal, sir, to ensure other families are protected from similar experiences. In the months that followed, my work expanded beyond housing security to comprehensive support systems, educational resources for military children, spouse employment programs, mental health services for families coping with deployment stress. Each initiative built upon the fundamental principle that had emerged from my own experience. The strongest defense against exploitation is a community of mutual respect and practical support. 1 year into my Pentagon assignment, I received an unexpected email from Brandon Cooper. His name in my inbox triggered an immediate visceral reaction, memories of violation and betrayal, surfacing despite the time and distance I'd established. The message was brief. Major Sawyer, I've completed my probation and restitution requirements. I understand you're now working on military family protection policies. The protocols you developed have been covered in several news articles. I want you to know I recognize the damage my actions caused, not just to you and Samantha, but to the wider military community. No excuses or justifications, just acknowledgement. Brandon Cooper. I sat with the message for several days, uncertain how or whether to respond. Was this genuine remorse or manipulative image rehabilitation? Did his acknowledgement deserve recognition, or would responding simply reopen healed wounds? I finally shared the email with Samantha during our weekly video call, wanting her perspective before deciding how to proceed. Interesting timing, she observed after reading it. Right as his probation ends. Right as he's presumably trying to rebuild his life. That was my thought as well, I admitted. Though the acknowledgement, however late, is more than I expected. She considered thoughtfully. You know, Dad, the work you're doing now, the protections you've created, they're not about Brandon anymore. They've transcended whatever he did or didn't do. True enough. So maybe the question isn't whether his apology is sincere, but whether acknowledging it serves any purpose for you, for your peace, for your work. Her wisdom, as always, cut through complications to the heart of the matter. Brandon's email, whether sincere remorse or calculated rehabilitation, had no bearing on the value of the work I was now doing. The security protocols, family support initiatives, and policy improvements would continue protecting military families regardless of his acknowledgement. I ultimately responded with a brief, professional message. Mr. Cooper, acknowledgement received. The security protocols have indeed been implemented at multiple installations, with positive results for deployed service members' families. Major Richard Sawyer. Neither acceptance nor rejection, neither forgiveness nor condemnation. Simply acknowledgement of the fact that his actions, however destructive in intent, had ultimately contributed to constructive change. 2 years into my Pentagon assignment, I received a call from General Briggs, now approaching retirement. Himself. Richard, he said warmly, I've been following your work from afar. The family support initiatives you've developed are making a real difference. Thank you, sir. It's been challenging but rewarding work. I'm not surprised you've excelled, he continued. Even back at Fort Carson, when I saw how you handled Cooper's invasion of your apartment, I knew you possessed something special. The ability to respond to disrespect with dignity, rather than destruction. I was angry, I admitted. I wanted to physically remove him myself. Of course you did. That would have been the human response. But you chose the honorable response instead, working through proper channels, trusting the system, maintaining your integrity throughout. As we continued catching up, I realized how far I had traveled from that moment of return, standing in my violated apartment, confronted with Brandon's mockery, feeling the accumulated weight of 25 years of service dismissed as meaningless. What had begun as personal humiliation had transformed into institutional improvement. What had been intended as disrespect had ultimately reinforced the very values Brandon had mocked. The dignity he had attempted to strip away had not only been restored, but amplified, recognized by the highest levels of the institution I had served throughout my adult life. 3 years after assuming the Pentagon position, I received notification of my promotion to lieutenant colonel, the culmination of a career that had taken unexpected turns, but ultimately aligned with my deepest values. Samantha flew to Washington for the ceremony, Thomas accompanying her for the first time. Lieutenant Colonel Sawyer, she said afterward, adjusting the new rank insignia she had pinned on my shoulders, has a nice ring to it. A surprise ending to a career I thought was concluding at Fort Carson, I acknowledged. Not an ending, she corrected. A continuation. A new chapter. That evening, as we celebrated over dinner, Thomas raised his glass in a toast. To Lieutenant Colonel Sawyer, whose commitment to protecting military families ensures that service members can focus on their missions knowing their loved ones are secure. And, Samantha added, raising her own glass, to the man who taught me that true honor isn't measured by how you're treated, but by how you respond, with dignity, with integrity, with constructive purpose. I looked at my daughter, confident, happy, engaged to a man who genuinely respected her, and felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought us here. Not despite Brandon's betrayal, but in some ways because of it. The violation that might have diminished us had instead revealed our core strength, had forced us to articulate and defend values we might otherwise have taken for granted. Sometimes I realized, honor isn't just preserved through victory in direct confrontation. Sometimes it's magnified through the transformative response to violation, through the quiet dignity of continuing forward, through the constructive work of building better systems, through the steady commitment to protecting others from similar harm. Brandon Cooper had entered my apartment believing he could diminish the value of my service, could mock the rank and respect I had earned through 25 years of sacrifice. He had seen the uniform as empty symbolism, the military community as exploitable rather than honorable. He had been wrong, not because I had defeated him in dramatic confrontation, not because I had sought personal revenge, but because the very values he dismissed, integrity, service, sacrifice, community, had proven stronger than his disrespect, had transformed his attempt at degradation into impetus for improvement, had converted personal violation into institutional protection. As Samantha Thomas and I walked the National Mall after dinner, the monuments illuminated against the night sky, I reflected on the strange journey from that moment of return to my violated apartment to this evening of celebration. The path had not been straight. The restoration had not been immediate. But through it all, through every unexpected turn and challenge, one truth had remained constant. Honor isn't just what you defend when attacked. It's what you build when tested. It's the dignity you maintain not just in victory, but in violation. It's the constructive purpose you extract from even the most painful experiences. Brandon Cooper had sought to prove that this old captain doesn't run things anymore. He had been right in one respect. The captain was gone. In his place stood a lieutenant colonel whose influence extended far beyond what Brandon could have imagined, whose work now protected countless military families from the very exploitation he had attempted, whose daughter had emerged stronger, wiser, more discerning from the very betrayal he had inflicted. True victory, I realized as we stood before the Lincoln Memorial, isn't measured in defeat of adversaries. It's measured in the lives improved, the systems strengthened, the values upheld, even, especially, when challenged. Sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect isn't retaliation, it's restoration.